All right, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're going to cover a topic that's all over the internet and all over the news, but most people still don't actually understand what it is.
Yeah, and like the second people hear the word incel, they already have a reaction. Either they're laughing or they're scared, or they think they know exactly what it is. But if we're being honest, there's a lot more going on than what most people see.
Before we even get into it, we want to be real clear. We're not here to clown on people who are lonely or struggling, but we're definitely not here to defend any harmful ideology. This is research based, and we actually went through real academic studies and government reports for this.
I'm not gonna lie, this was a rabbit hole and a half or two, bro.
Bro, I was reading at midnight and I was like, why am I doing this to myself?
But it was genuinely interesting. So our main questions today are: what is involuntary celibacy? What actually causes someone to go down that path, and why do some people in these communities end up avoiding women entirely?
And the short answer is that it's just way more complicated than, oh, they can't just get girls. It connects to real stuff: loneliness, mental health, rejection, shame, and how online spaces can completely reshape the way someone sees themselves and the world.
We'll be dropping the actual source names as we go, so this isn't just us talking off the top of our heads.
All right, so let's start from the beginning. What even is an incel? So the word incel comes from involuntary celibate. At its most basic, it just describes someone who wants a romantic or sexual relationship, but genuinely feels like they can't get into one no matter what they do.
And that kind of sounds like just being single and frustrated, which I feel like a lot of people relate to at some point.
Right, but there's a big difference between being single or having a rough time dating versus taking on the incel identity as like your whole entire personality.
Exactly. And this distinction actually comes up in the research. There's a paper called Involuntary Celibacy, a review of incel ideology and experiences with dating, rejection, and associated mental health and emotional sequelae, published in Current Psychiatry Reports by Brandon Sparks, Alexandra Zittenberg, and Mark Olver. They reviewed a huge pile of existing studies and found that incel identity goes way beyond just being single. It becomes a whole worldview.
So it turns out from I'm struggling with dating into beliefs about why, like about looks, height, genetics, social status, stuff that feels completely outside our control.
And then there's this term that gets used a lot to incel communities, the black pill. Can one of y'all explain that?
Yeah, so being black pilled basically means you've accepted the belief that dating success is completely predetermined, that some guys are just born attractive enough to be chosen and everyone else is permanently out of luck. Nothing you do matters.
Um, so, which is such a specific and hopeless way to see the world because once you believe that, what's even the point of trying?
Right, and that's where the avoidance starts to make sense in a sad way. If you genuinely believe the outcome is already decided, why would you even put yourself out there and risk being rejected?
And going back to that review, they found that incel identity is often tied to repeated romantic rejection, frustration, and in some online spaces, real misogyny. Like it's not just I'm sad that I'm single. It can become women are the enemy.
And and that shift from pain to blame is really what this whole podcast is trying to unpack. How does that happen?
Let's get into it. What does the research actually say causes someone to end up identifying this way?
Okay, so based on everything that we read, it's not just one cause. It's like a perfect storm of personal stuff, social stuff, and then the internet amplifying all of it.
Walk us through it.
All right, so the biggest factor, and this is the one that surprised me, is loneliness. Not just I'm kind of bored kind of loneliness. It's like deep chronic loneliness. There's a study called One is the Loneliest Number: Involuntary Celibacy, Mental Health, and Loneliness, published in Current Psychology. It's also by the same authors as the previous source, and they actually recruited real incel identifying men and compared them to men who didn't identify that way.
Okay, and what did they find?
The incel group reported way more loneliness, way less social support, and higher levels of something called rejection sensitivity.
Okay, I need you to break down rejection sensitivity because I've seen that term before, but I'm just not. I just don't fully get it.
I actually know this one. So rejection sensitivity is when your brain is basically on high alert for any sign that someone might be rejecting you. Like if a girl gives you a short reply, Most people assume she's probably busy, but someone with high rejection sensitivity, it really goes to she hates me or I ruined it. Their brain jumps to the worst interpretation automatically.
And in that Sparks, Zittenberg, and Over loneliness study, they specifically flagged rejection sensitivity as one of the main things that separated the incel group from everyone else. Because when you assume rejection everywhere, social situations feel like a minefield, so you just stop going into them.
And then when you stop going into social situations, you never practice, and the next time you even think about talking to a girl, it feels even harder than before. It's a loop.
Okay, what's the second factor?
Mental health. The research consistently links incel identity to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. There's an independent government report called Predicting Harm Among Incels: The Roles of Mental Health, Ideological Belief, and Social Networking, commissioned by the UK Commission for Countering Extremism and written by Joe Whitaker, William Costello, and Andrew Thomas at Swansea University. The report found that mental health struggles, anger, and how deep someone is in online networks all feed into each other and increase risk.
So it's not just about dating, there's real clinical stuff underneath a lot of this.
Right, and that reframes the conversation, right? Like instead of just going, these people are weird, you have to ask, are some of them genuinely struggling and not being able to receive help?
Which doesn't excuse harmful beliefs, but it does explain why someone becomes vulnerable to them.
Okay, and what's the third factor?
I want this one. Social comparison, and this is something we all experience because we all use social media.
Oh yeah, the Instagram effect.
Exactly. Think about what you see online. Couples everywhere, attractive people, perfect gym transformations, and dating influencers. People only showing the best parts of their lives. For most of us, that's just content. But for someone who already feels bad about themselves in a situation, all that is basically confirming the worst fears about themselves.
Like it becomes evidence. See, everyone else has figured it out. I'm the only one who can't.
And dating apps make it way worse because apps are appearance based. Swipe left, swipe right. If you're getting ignored or rejected over and over, at some point your brain starts treating that as objective proof. An algorithm said nobody wants me. Case closed.
Which is actually a wild distortion because dating apps are not an accurate representation of how attractive or of how attraction or connection works in real life. But when that's your main method of trying to meet people, it shapes everything.
And the fourth factor is what ties everything down.
Echo chambers.
Right, so picture this. Someone is lonely, anxious, getting rejected on apps, feeling worthless. They go online looking for answers. They search, why can't I get a girlfriend or whatever, and they find a community.
And that community has a very specific answer ready for them. Not, hey, maybe try therapy or work on your confidence. It's it's not your fault. Women are shallow. The system is rigged against you and you're never gonna win.
And when you're hurting, the answer feels so good because it removes all the pressure. You don't have to fix anything. It's not your fault. Everybody else is the problem.
But it's also a trap because now instead of dealing with the actual issues, loneliness, anxiety, social skills, the person is just maintaining in resentment with other people who feel the same way.
And there's actually a Europol report on this. It's titled Incel Online Communities, Violence, and the Construction of Collective Victimhood, published by Europol, written by researcher Emilia Lonella from the University of Helsinki. And it describes how incel communities specifically build what's called collective victimhood, where a whole group bonds over seeing themselves as victims of women, of society, and of more attractive men.
So it's not just one person feels bad. The community actively enforces and grows that feeling together.
Exactly. And once someone's identity gets locked into that, being an incel isn't just a feeling anymore. It's who they are. And if someone tries to challenge it, it feels like a personal attack.
So, becoming an incel isn't usually like one bad day. It builds over time. Loneliness to rejection to avoidance to finding the community to adopting the worldview.
Okay, so now we transition. The most specific part of our question. If the whole frustration is about not being able to get a relationship, why would someone avoid the very people they want a relationship with? It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive, but when you understand the psychology, it actually makes total sense, just in a really sad way.
Can you break it down for me?
Yeah, so the first reason is fear of rejection, which ties directly back to the rejection sensitivity that we talked about from Sparks, Zinenberg, and Olver's loneliness study. If your brain is already predicting rejection every time you talk to someone, The safest move in your head is just to not try at all. You can't fail if you never attempt it.
It's the same thing that happens with social anxiety. You avoid whatever makes you nervous. And in the short term, avoiding feels safer. But in the long term, you never get over the fear. It just keeps on expanding.
So if someone never actually talks to a woman, they never get normal practice. They never learn how to just have a regular conversation, and then every time that they even think about it, it feels more and more impossible.
Right. And that Sparks, Zettenberg, and Olver review specifically noted that social difficulties and dating anxiety are really common in the incel identifying population. It's not just about attitude. There are real social skill gaps that build up over time from avoidance.
Okay, the second reason is resentment. And this one's different. Because it's not fear driving the avoidance anymore, it's a belief system.
Yeah, once the community has taught you that women are shallow, that they only pick a small group of guys, that they're basically your enemy, you're not avoiding women because you're scared. You're avoiding them because you've already decided that they're not worth your time.
And the Europol Lonella report gets into this too. It describes how the collective victimhood framing in incel communities leads to actual hostility towards women as a group, not just individual frustration, but an ideological thing.
And that's where the line between a struggling person and a dangerous person can start to appear. There's a big difference between I'm too anxious to talk to girls and I hate women because they ruin my life.
The third reason is shame. Some guys feel so embarrassed about what they're at. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not tall enough. I don't have enough going for me to even deserve to be approaching to women. So they just remove themselves out of the question entirely.
Which is painful because shame is one of the hardest emotions to work through. And instead of getting actual support, they're in a community that validates the shame while also giving them a villain to blame.
And here's the brutal part. The more isolated you become from women, the more you're only understanding a woman is coming from other angry men online. You never get to test your assumptions against reality. So every stereotype just gets stronger and more real to you.
The whole cycle is rejection causes insecurity, insecurity causes avoidance, avoidance causes more loneliness pushes you into deeper into the community like incel.is, the community which then further reinforces the belief which the beliefs makes you avoid more women and it just keeps going on to no natural exit.
Unless something from outside comes in and breaks the pattern.
So, all right, let's zoom out. Why should people actually care about this topic?
Well, there's a few reasons. First, loneliness is a serious public health issue. This isn't just an incel thing, it's a society thing. Chronic loneliness affects mental and physical health. So if there are whole communities of men who are deeply isolated and not getting support, that's a problem worth paying attention to.
And second, some parts of the incel community have been connected to real-world harm. The Whitaker, Costello, and Thomas report, the Predicting Harm Among Incels report from the UK Commission, found that the combination of mental health struggles, extreme ideology, anger, and deep involvement in incel online networks increased risks. That's a real finding from real data.
But, and this is really important, they're not saying every lonely man or every incel is dangerous. That'd be completely unfair and inaccurate. The point is understanding that what specific conditions can push someone further.
Right. Most people who feel lonely or rejected never go anywhere near violence. The research makes that clear. It's about identifying the risk factors, not painting everyone with the same brush.
There's also a bigger cultural picture. The Incel Violence and Victimhood study by Amelia Lonella and Shane Murphy that looked at how incel communities discussed real-world violent incidents online, and it showed how these spaces can actually use violence as part of building community identity, like the discourse around it pulls people deeper in.
Which is a wild thing to think about. The community is not just exists separate from these events. It actively processes them and uses them to reinforce the worldview.
And that's why ignoring this stuff doesn't work. These ideas don't just stay in niche online forums. They spread. They show up in regular conversations. They shape how young men think about themselves and women.
So the solution is not shaming lonely people. It's that just drives them further underground. It's giving people better alternatives like therapy, real friendships, communities that encourage growth, and
One
teaching
second,
healthier ways
one
to
second,
handle
Michelle.
rejection.
Schools and families play a role too, like actually teaching young men how to process rejection without turning up into resentment, how to build genuine confidence, how to form real friendships. That stuff matters.
All right, let's wrap this
Oh,
up.
I'm
We
doing my
covered a lot
assignment.
today.
I'm doing my
Yeah,
podcast.
so to recap, involuntary celibacy is way more layered than most people think. It forms out of loneliness, rejection sensitivity, depression, social comparison, dating app rejection, and online echo chambers that convert pain into ideology. And the Sparks, Zetterberg, and Oliver research across both their 2022 review and their 2023 study in current psychology shows those patterns pretty clearly.
The Europol Lonello report showed how collective victimhood gets built in these online spaces. The Whittaker, Costello, and Thomas report from the UK Commission for Countering Extremism showed the mental health and radicalization connection. And the Lunella and Murph study in terrorism and political violence showed how online incel communities actually process and use real world violence.
And the avoidance piece. The reason people in these communities stop talking to women comes down to three main things: fear of rejection, resentment, and shame. Each one of makes sense psychologically, but all of these three together create a loop that's really hard to break out of.
The core takeaway is take loneliness seriously. Don't write people off because they're struggling socially, but also don't excuse beliefs that dehumanize women. Both of these things can be true at the same time.
Empathy and accountability. You can feel for someone's pain without agreeing with how they're expressing it.
And instead of just labeling people, the better question is what would actually help? What gives someone a real path out of isolation before it turns into something worse?
That's the conversation worth having.
Thanks for listening, everybody. All the sources are in the description below.
Peace.